Would you believe it? An 80-year-old man was thrown into a den of starving lions, yet survived miraculously for 6 days without a single injury. This isn't just a legend, it's the real story of Daniel. But why was an innocent, elderly man subjected to such cruelty? And what gave him the strength to endure this impossible challenge? In this video, I invite you on a journey of mystery and faith, where belief is pushed to its limits. Imagine yourself in Daniel's place. What would you do when faced with certain death? How would you hold on to your faith in such dire circumstances? The story of Daniel is not just an ancient tale. It is a powerful example of faith's resilience. It teaches us that no matter how dark the situation, there is always a guiding light when we place our trust in God. Are you ready to unlock the mystery of this story? Be sure to subscribe and enable notifications so you won't miss out on more inspirational stories like this. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Daniel's journey takes us back to the 6th century BC, during a time of great upheaval in the ancient Middle East. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon attacked Jerusalem, leading to the forced deportation of thousands of Jews into Babylonian captivity. Among the captives was Daniel, a young noble from Judah. Despite his young age, he quickly exhibited exceptional qualities that set him apart and led to his selection for special duties. According to the Bible, King Nebuchadnezzar commanded his chief official, Ashpenaz, to seek out young men from Israel's noble families to serve in the royal court. Daniel and his 3 noble companions were among those chosen. These young men were not only required to be physically appealing, but also highly intelligent, quick learners, and knowledgeable in various fields. Qualities that made them ideal for royal service. Once in Babylon, Daniel and his friends began a rigorous 3-year training program under Ashpenaz's supervision. They studied the language and customs of the Babylonians, preparing for their roles in the royal court. As part of their preparation, King Nebuchadnezzar offered them food and wine from his own table, symbolizing both generosity and honor. Despite these privileges, Daniel remained steadfast in his faith and refused to consume food sacrificed to Babylonian gods. This decision reflected his deep commitment to his beliefs and his trust in God. Daniel's journey represents both unwavering devotion and the realization of a powerful prophecy from Isaiah. This prophecy, spoken over a century before Daniel's birth, predicted a grim fate for the nation of Judah. As recorded in Isaiah, God warned, "The days will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your ancestors have stored up until today will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left. Some of your own sons, your own flesh and blood, will be taken away, and they will serve in the palace of the king of Babylon." Isaiah 39, 6-7. This prophecy came to pass when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, after seizing Jerusalem, took its most talented young men into captivity, including Daniel. The experience of being torn from his homeland and faith must have been devastating for Daniel and his people. The Bible does not detail Daniel's family background, but they likely suffered deep sorrow. Did they recognize Isaiah's prophecy unfolding before their eyes? Did they understand that this tragedy was the fulfillment of divine warning? Imagining their anguish at losing loved ones to an unknown land is heartbreaking. Daniel and his companions' exile became a clear sign of God's judgment. Yet in this narrative, we also see the wisdom and might of God, who used Daniel and his friends to display his power in the most challenging situations. Far from being just a captive, Daniel rose to prominence in the Babylonian royal court, showing that God always has a higher purpose for those who trust in him, even in hardship. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon aimed to dominate not only through military conquests, but also through symbolic gestures. One of his calculated moves was to seize the sacred objects of Israel's temple and place them in his own Babylonian sanctuary. This was more than a typical war victory. It was a statement: "My deity is superior to yours." By doing this, Nebuchadnezzar sought to undermine the power of Israel's God and elevate the gods of Babylon above all others. In the face of such adversity, Daniel and his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, stood strong. Upon arriving in Babylon, they were enrolled in an elite 3-year training program to prepare them for royal service. As part of this training, they were offered meals from the king's own table, a privilege that ordinary captives could only dream of. However, declining this offer would have been seen as a grave insult, one that could cost them their lives. Daniel made a courageous and difficult choice. He declined the royal food and wine, fearing that consuming them would make him impure. Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food and drink. Daniel 1:8. This was not a trivial matter, as being selected to serve in the royal court was an exceptional opportunity for a captive, and rejecting the king's generosity could have fatal consequences. Imagine being Nebuchadnezzar. How would you feel if a captive refused the privileges you had granted them? Such a rejection was not just disrespectful, but also a defiant refusal of what the king considered a great honor. Daniel's firm stance was not only an act of faith, but also a direct challenge to Nebuchadnezzar's authority. However, something remarkable occurred. Instead of being punished, Daniel received divine blessings and protection, leaving the king in awe of his wisdom and perseverance. Together with his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel demonstrated unwavering faith in all circumstances. By rejecting the Babylonian king's food, they embarked on a journey of trials and triumphs, proving that their devotion to God would always be safeguarded, allowing them to bear witness to his majesty in a troubled world. Daniel refused to consume the royal food due to his deeply held religious beliefs. One possible reason was that the food violated the dietary laws stated in Leviticus 11, which distinguished between clean and unclean foods according to Jewish customs. Certain meats, such as pork and horse meat, were commonly eaten in Babylon, but were forbidden by Jewish law. Although wine was not strictly prohibited, it might have been consecrated to Babylonian deities, making it unacceptable for Daniel, as consuming such offerings would compromise his faith. Another interpretation suggests that Daniel may have been following a Nazirite vow, which required abstaining from specific foods to maintain purity. While the Old Testament does not provide strong evidence supporting this view, consuming food dedicated to foreign gods could have been controversial within the Jewish community. The most plausible explanation is that Daniel recognized that eating the king's food signified allegiance to the Babylonian ruler. Daniel 11:26 warns that partaking in the king's meals could indicate submission to worldly powers. Thus, Daniel's decision was not solely about dietary restrictions or religious customs. It was a declaration of spiritual independence. By refusing the king's provisions, he demonstrated that his loyalty lay with God alone. Daniel's resolve was unwavering. Despite the royal banquet being a luxurious privilege, he opted for a simpler diet, vegetables and water, to uphold his faith. The chief official overseeing the king's food was skeptical, fearing that Daniel and his companions might appear weaker, which could put his own position at risk. Yet, Daniel insisted on a 10-day trial. "Please test us for 10 days. Give us only vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with the young men who eat the royal food and deal with us according to what you observe." Daniel 1:12. With unwavering faith in God, Daniel and his companions embraced the challenge. After 10 days, they were not only in better health, but also appeared more radiant than those who ate the king's food. This was undeniable proof of God's protection and blessings for those who remained loyal to him. At the conclusion of the 10-day test, the results were astonishing. Daniel and his 3 companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were visibly healthier and looked more robust than all the young men who had consumed the royal meals. As a result, the guard altered their diet, replacing the king's food and wine with vegetables. This transformation was not merely a dietary shift, but a testament to God's active presence in their lives. God bestowed upon them knowledge and wisdom in all forms of literature and learning. And to Daniel specifically, he granted the rare gift of understanding visions and dreams. When their training was complete and they stood before King Nebuchadnezzar, the king personally conversed with them and found that none could rival Daniel and his 3 companions in wisdom and comprehension. Consequently, they were appointed to serve in the king's court, advising on matters of intellect and knowledge. King Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed that he declared them 10 times more capable than all the magicians and enchanters throughout his kingdom. Their appointment was not solely a recognition of their talents, but also a reflection of God's protection and blessings which had guided them through their trials. Daniel and his friends demonstrated that faithfulness to God leads to divine protection and wisdom beyond measure. Daniel went on to serve under 4 successive rulers: Nebuchadnezzar, his son Belshazzar, and Kings Darius and Cyrus. Though regimes changed, Daniel's faith remained unshaken, and he continued to be a trusted and wise figure in the royal court. Given that Daniel and his companions were chosen for Nebuchadnezzar's palace, one might question why the king sought to educate and integrate Jewish captives into his administration. Why did he rename them, offer them royal food, and treat them as nobility? If these young men could one day oppose Babylon, what was the reasoning behind reshaping their identities through food, names, and education? Nebuchadnezzar's intent was to reshape their minds through a systematic assimilation into Babylonian culture. His aim was to make them forsake their God and heritage, binding them completely to Babylon. The provision of royal meals, new names, and formal education was not just a privilege, but a method of control, a way to shift their allegiance from the God of Israel to the Babylonian Empire. Renaming them was not merely an administrative decision, but an intentional act to sever their connection to their faith and origins. Similarly, feeding them royal food was a strategy to create a sense of dependency on Babylon, signifying that they were no longer independent, but subjugated to Nebuchadnezzar's authority. Yet, Daniel and his companions saw through this scheme. They refused to partake in the king's food, not just as a dietary choice, but as a bold declaration of their faithfulness to the God of Israel. This act was particularly notable because most other Jewish captives, including the prophet Ezekiel, had no means to resist their fate. Yet Daniel and his friends distinguished themselves through their exceptional abilities and unwavering faith. Nebuchadnezzar chose Daniel and the other young men not just because of their outstanding qualities, but also because they were of noble lineage from Israel. They were without blemish, good-looking, intelligent, wise, quick learners, and capable of serving in the king's palace. These attributes made them prime candidates for future leadership roles in Babylon. This was, in fact, an attack on Israel's future. If these young men were released, they could lead their people. However, instead of guiding their own nation, they risked being influenced by Babylonian ideology and turned into tools for Nebuchadnezzar's rule. Yet, Daniel was not deceived. He recognized that serving the king was part of God's greater plan. Though Jerusalem had been destroyed, God's work with Israel was not over. Daniel, likely still a teenager when Babylon captured Jerusalem, possessed exceptional physical, intellectual, and social skills granted by God, allowing him to distinguish himself. Nebuchadnezzar was not merely collecting war trophies, but also gathering the most brilliant minds into his court. Though Judah was in ruins, God had not forsaken Daniel. Because of his extraordinary abilities, particularly his gift for interpreting dreams and visions, Daniel quickly ascended to prominence in Babylon's royal court. His rise not only enhanced his reputation, but also proved that despite his exile and hardships, God was still guiding him and had a greater purpose for him. Daniel's first great challenge came when King Nebuchadnezzar had a distressing dream that he could neither understand nor interpret. The dream left the king deeply troubled, and he refused to accept explanations from the magicians unless they could first prove their credibility. Thus, the king made an impossible demand. "I have had a dream that deeply troubles me, and I must know its meaning. Tell me the dream itself, and then interpret it for me." He required the magicians to first recount the dream before explaining its meaning, an impossible request that no one could fulfill. The magician's failure to meet the king's request enraged him. Out of frustration, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the execution of all the wise men in Babylon, including Daniel, despite him not being among the magicians. This decision inadvertently placed Daniel in a life-threatening situation. Despite the danger, Daniel remained calm. He turned to God in prayer, asking him to reveal the king's dream. God answered Daniel's plea, granting him the ability to recount the dream exactly as it had occurred and to explain its meaning. Through this event, Daniel displayed not only great wisdom, but also unwavering faith in God. This made him stand out even more, as he had received divine insight that no one else possessed, securing his position in Nebuchadnezzar's court. So impressed was King Darius by Daniel's abilities and integrity that he appointed him as governor over the entire province of Babylon, placing him in charge of not only the magicians, but also all the kingdom's officials. Daniel seemed to be flourishing, receiving great honors and privileges in the royal court. Daniel's rise to power triggered jealousy among many, prompting some to plot against him. These envious officials, resentful of his influence, sought to tarnish his reputation and ensnare him in a trap that would lead to his downfall in the lion's den. The tragic event unfolded as follows. Upon ascending the throne, King Darius appointed 120 senators to govern Babylon, a city spanning over 2,200 acres, making it the world's largest at the time, with a population surpassing 200,000 people. To ensure efficient governance, Darius divided the kingdom into multiple regions, assigning the senators as governors. To oversee them, he appointed 3 administrators, one of whom was Daniel. These governors reported directly to Daniel. Daniel's extraordinary wisdom and integrity soon made him stand out among the administrators and governors, leading King Darius to consider placing him in charge of the entire kingdom. However, this advancement incited hostility among the other officials who sought to bring him down. Their envy drove them to orchestrate a plot that would force Daniel into a fatal error, ultimately resulting in his sentencing to the lion's den, a punishment regarded as one of the most terrifying of that era. Daniel's story is not merely about his ascent in the Babylonian court, but also serves as a powerful lesson in integrity and ethical leadership. The administrators and governors tried every means to find faults in his governance, but failed to uncover any misconduct. This highlights Daniel's exemplary character. In today's political landscape, where leaders are constantly scrutinized and frequently caught in scandals, the idea of someone serving for 50 years without corruption or wrongdoing seems almost unimaginable. Yet, Daniel achieved it. No embezzlement, no internal conspiracies, no illicit dealings or bribes, and no allegations from his staff. His life was an open book, completely above reproach. Even after thorough investigation, his adversaries found nothing incriminating. With no other options, they had to fabricate false accusations against him. This only further demonstrated Daniel's unwavering honesty and steadfast faith. The fact that no wrongdoing was found in Daniel's life does not imply he was flawless in every way. No human is perfect, and Daniel was no exception. Yet, what set him apart was his unwavering integrity, which made him remarkable among his peers. Daniel never proclaimed his own righteousness. Rather, it was those around him who bore witness to his character, unable to find any fault in his conduct or integrity. His life of integrity is a shining example for both our personal and professional journeys. When we live with honesty and transparency, we naturally earn the trust and respect of others. This teaches us an essential truth. A life lived rightly has nothing to fear from scrutiny. Daniel's story is not only a testament to unwavering faith, but also a reminder that our honesty and devotion to God become evident to those around us. As McLaren wisely stated, "The world may not fully grasp my faith, but it can certainly judge my actions." In other words, while people may not understand the deeper aspects of one's faith, they can easily recognize negative traits such as pride, selfishness, or deceit when they appear. If Daniel's story has inspired you, be sure to like and share this video to spread these powerful lessons. Stay connected to explore more incredible biblical stories. Despite Daniel's faithfulness and integrity, those around him grew envious. They realized they could not find any wrongdoing in his work or personal life, so they devised a plan to entrap him in his own faith. They understood that if they were to find a reason to accuse Daniel, it would have to be through his unshakable devotion to God. This highlights how openly Daniel lived out his faith, so much so that even his adversaries acknowledged it. These men conspired to put Daniel in an inescapable situation. They approached King Darius and suggested a decree that, for 30 days, no one could pray to any god or person except the king, on penalty of being thrown into the lion's den. This was a deliberate strategy to strip Daniel of his freedom to worship. knowing that he would never abandon his prayers to God. They convinced the king to sign an irrevocable decree, bound by the unchangeable laws of the Medes and Persians. This was a critical turning point in the story, one where Daniel's enemies manipulated power and law to force him to choose between his faith and obedience to the king. Yet through it all, Daniel remained steadfast, knowing that his faithfulness to God would ultimately define his fate. The accounts of King Nebuchadnezzar and King Darius serve as powerful reminders of how authority and religious devotion can be exploited in history. To showcase his supreme power, King Nebuchadnezzar had a massive golden statue built and decreed that everyone in the empire must worship it. This decree led to the defiance of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, three of Daniel's closest friends who refused to bow down. Their miraculous survival in the fiery furnace stands as both a testimony of faith and an example of resilience against religious persecution. Under King Darius, a law was passed that forbade prayer to any god or deity except the king. Despite this, Daniel remained steadfast in his devotion, continuing his daily practice of praying 3 times a day. His disciplined prayer life highlighted several significant aspects of his faith, including praying in private. Daniel prayed in his upper chamber, showing that his prayers were not for show, but for sincere communion with God. Prayer facing Jerusalem. By opening his windows toward Jerusalem, he demonstrated his longing for the holy city and the temple that had once stood there. Praying according to Scripture, Daniel followed the teachings found in 1 Kings 8, where Solomon encouraged prayer toward Jerusalem as a sign of faith that God would listen. Praying on his knees. Kneeling was a demonstration of humility and respect, similar to the actions of biblical figures such as Jesus, Peter, and Paul. Praying 3 times daily. Daniel maintained a habit of praying at set times, recognizing the necessity of continual worship and seeking divine guidance. Prayer with thanksgiving. His prayers were filled with gratitude, acknowledging God's blessings in his life. As Charles Spurgeon once said, prayer and praise should always go together, rising like twin angels up Jacob's ladder. The story of Daniel illustrates his incredible faith and dedication to his spiritual beliefs. He remained unwavering even when his life was at risk. Though Daniel's enemies plotted against him, using his faith as a trap, he remained steadfast. He was fully aware of the decree, but chose not to waver. His persistence was not out of rebellion, but out of devotion to God and an unshakable moral conviction. Daniel continued to pray 3 times daily, not as an act of defiance, but as an expression of his unwavering faith. His consistency reflected his belief that true faith does not require grand displays, but rather quiet dedication. Remarkably, King Darius, despite enforcing an irreversible decree, was deeply distressed and made efforts to save Daniel. This reveals that while the king's power was absolute in law, his kindness and concern for Daniel remained strong. The situation brings forth an important dilemma. Should one strictly adhere to earthly laws, or should they prioritize deeper spiritual values such as faith and devotion? Even though Daniel's choice to continue praying to God was noble, it also led him straight into the trap carefully planned by his adversaries. These men closely monitored Daniel's daily prayers, determined to accuse him of defying the royal decree. They went before the king and questioned, "Did you not sign a decree stating that for the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human apart from you, O king, shall be cast into the lion's den. Daniel 6:12. King Darius confirmed that the decree was irrevocable under the laws of the Medes and Persians. Daniel 6:15. Despite his respect for the king, Daniel did not alter his routine, knowing well that this decision could cost him his life. He remained faithful only to God, refusing to worship Darius, and stayed committed to his practice of prayer, even in the face of death. His actions were not acts of defiance or martyrdom, but a continuation of his lifelong faithfulness to God. Upon learning of Daniel's predicament, King Darius became greatly troubled. Instead of shifting blame, he took accountability for his decree. This makes him a unique and admirable figure, as admitting one's mistakes is often difficult. He spent the entire day searching for a way to save Daniel, though the decree was legally binding and unchangeable. King Darius was not pleased to see Daniel's enemies succeed in their scheme, but he recognized that he alone was responsible for the outcome. This situation reflects a familiar struggle in life. When we make mistakes, sometimes our only recourse is to seek divine intervention, much like King Darius did. With no other options left, King Darius was forced to abide by his own decree and ordered Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. In those times, executions typically occurred at night, following immediate confirmation of the accusations. Yet, Daniel's unwavering trust in God and God's miraculous intervention shifted the king's perspective entirely. This account stands as a profound lesson on faith, humility, and the incredible power of God at work in the lives of the faithful. When Daniel's accusers saw that their trap had worked, they approached the king and reminded him, "Remember, O king, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or ordinance established by the king may be revoked." This underscores the unalterable nature of Persian law, which even the king himself could not override. Though King Darius cared deeply for Daniel and wished to spare him, he was bound by the laws of his kingdom and was forced to issue the final order. Before Daniel was cast into the lion's den, King Darius spoke words of reassurance. "May your God, whom you serve faithfully, deliver you." Daniel 6:16. The king then ordered a large stone to be placed over the den's entrance and sealed it with his royal seal, as well as the seals of his nobles, ensuring that Daniel's situation remained unchanged. That night, King Darius returned to his palace, but he was overwhelmed with anxiety. He refused to eat, sought no entertainment, and found himself unable to sleep. His distress reflected the deep concern and affection he had for Daniel, though he was powerless to change the decree. If Darius held Daniel in such high regard, why didn't he simply nullify the decree? The reason lies in the legal framework of the Persian Empire, where once a royal edict was declared, it could not be retracted or modified, not even by the king. This policy demonstrates the inflexible nature of Persian law, where even a ruler could not overturn his own decision, despite personal emotions. It serves as a reminder that legal systems, while necessary for governance, can sometimes hinder justice and compassion. Though bound by law, Darius still expressed faith in Daniel's God, believing in his power to save. His hope was rewarded when Daniel miraculously emerged unharmed from the lion's den, proving the strength and mercy of God toward his faithful followers. Based on historical data, Daniel was likely between 70 and 80 years old at this time. King Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled from 605 BCE, brought Daniel to Babylon as a captive when he was still a young man. likely under 20 years old, as Babylonian tradition prioritized training younger individuals for royal service. By analyzing this historical timeline, we can estimate Daniel's age at crucial events in his life. When King Darius rose to power and made Daniel his chief advisor around 539 to 538 BCE, Daniel was probably around 65 to 70 years old. This would place him at approximately 70 to 80 years old when he was thrown into the lion's den. If he lived another 15 years, he would have been around 80 to 85 at the time of his passing. A crucial aspect of the story is King Darius sealing the den. This action was not only a demonstration of his authority, but also a means of preventing any tampering with Daniel's fate. While Darius cared for Daniel, he recognized that his political adversaries might attempt to manipulate the situation. Sealing the den ensured that no one could interfere, whether to rescue Daniel or to further conspire against him. This act showed the king's dedication to enforcing the law while subtly indicating his hope that Daniel might still survive. Regarding Daniel, it is almost certain that he prayed while inside the lion's den. Prayer was not just an act of desperation for him, but an integral part of his daily routine. Even in the face of extreme danger, he remained firm in his faith, demonstrating his unwavering trust in God's protection and plan for his life. At the break of dawn, after a restless night, King Darius rushed to the lion's den and called out to Daniel with deep concern, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to save you from the lions?" Daniel 6:20. His words revealed both fear and hope, his anxiety for Daniel's fate, but also his growing belief in Daniel's God. Daniel, in a composed and thankful tone, replied, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and I have done no wrong against you, O king." Daniel 6:22. His response confirmed not only God's miraculous intervention, but also his unwavering integrity and faithfulness. Overcome with joy upon hearing Daniel's voice, King Darius immediately commanded that he be lifted from the den. Astonishingly, Daniel emerged without a single scratch, a powerful testament to God's divine protection. In contrast, Daniel's accusers faced a dire fate. They were thrown into the lion's den and met with immediate destruction. This served both as a punishment for their deceit and as undeniable evidence of God's justice in defending his faithful. The story of Daniel also conveys a deep spiritual truth. Faith does not exempt believers from trials, but unwavering trust in God ensures deliverance. God sent his angel at the moment Daniel needed it most, fulfilling the promise in Hebrews 1:14. Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Daniel's faith not only saved his life, but also earned him a place in Hebrews 11:33, where it is recorded that through faith, he shut the mouths of lions. This highlights the incredible strength of faith, not only as a source of divine protection, but also as a lesson in complete reliance on God. Even in the darkest circumstances, Darius was filled with rage against those who had manipulated him into condemning Daniel. As a result, those who conspired against Daniel faced the very judgment they had devised for him. When they were thrown into the lion's den, the lions immediately overpowered them before they even hit the ground. This dramatic turn of events served as proof that Daniel's survival was not due to chance or natural causes, but was purely the result of divine intervention. It also reinforced the message that God upholds justice, ensuring that the guilty face judgment while the innocent are protected. After witnessing this miraculous event, King Darius issued a royal decree, spreading a message throughout his vast empire to glorify Daniel's God. He proclaimed, "May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, people must fear and honor the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. He delivers and rescues. He performs wonders and miracles in heaven and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." Daniel 6:25-27. This royal proclamation not only praised Daniel's God, but also recognized his eternal authority and limitless power, a profound declaration from a ruler of the ancient world, acknowledging the supremacy of Daniel's God. With God's guidance, Daniel not only survived, but prospered under the rule of both King Darius and King Cyrus. This powerfully illustrates God's unwavering loyalty to those who remain faithful to him, even in the most difficult times. This reminds us that even in a society that does not embrace Christianity, we can still contribute to the welfare of our community while staying true to our faith and core spiritual values. This message is especially important for modern Christians, particularly those living in countries where Christianity is outlawed or where expressing their faith openly is dangerous. Daniel's story in the lion's den is a compelling lesson and an inspiring example of faith and perseverance. One of the most striking aspects of this story is its parallel to Jesus Christ. Both Daniel and Jesus were falsely accused and unjustly condemned. Yet they stood firm in their trust in God and were delivered in miraculous ways. Daniel's survival in the den is not just a miracle, but a foreshadowing of Christ's resurrection, who overcame death to bring salvation to the world. What makes this story extraordinary is Daniel's unshakable faith and endurance despite extreme hardship. Even when placed in mortal danger, he refused to renounce his beliefs and remained committed to God. This teaches us that no matter what trials we face, unwavering faith in God leads to salvation and divine protection. If you were inspired by this story and its lessons, share your thoughts in the comments, send this video to your friends and family, and reflect together on the strength of faith. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future content. Thank you for watching, and may God bless your day